There are moments in life that arrive without warning. Moments that look ordinary on the surface. Just another Tuesday, just another argument with your best friend, just another afternoon where nothing seems to matter, and then suddenly, without permission, they crack something open inside you that you didn't even know was closed. This is one of those moments. My name doesn't matter right now. What matters is what happened the day my best friend, loud, dramatic, absolutely unstoppable Maya, looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You are doing this. I don't care what you think. You're doing this today." And I had no idea that those 9 words would change everything I thought I knew about myself. Let me take you back. Let me take you all the way back to where it started. It was a Saturday in October. The kind of October that smells like cinnamon and cold air, where the leaves are turning gold, and the whole world feels like it's in the middle of becoming something new. I was sitting on Maya's bedroom floor, surrounded by fabric samples, scattered nail polish bottles, and 3 different curling irons she swore she needed. I was there to help her get ready for her cousin's wedding reception. That was my only job. Help Maya. Zip up a dress. Hold the hairspray. Clap when she looked beautiful, which, let's be honest, was always. That was the plan. But Maya has never in her life followed a plan. She was standing in front of her massive mirror, holding up a deep violet gown against her body, frowning at her reflection like it personally offended her. And then she turned around, slowly, with that look on her face, the one that means trouble, the one that means she's already decided something, and she's just waiting for you to catch up. "Try this one," she said, holding out a different dress. A rose gold one, structured at the top, flowing at the bottom, with tiny crystal details along the neckline that caught the light like scattered stars. I blinked. I laughed. I said, "Maya, that's for you." She said, "I know, but I want to see it on you first." The silence that followed was enormous. Not awkward, just enormous. Like it was holding its breath along with me. I had never worn a dress. Not once. Not even as a child for a costume, not even as a dare, not even in the privacy of my own room when nobody was watching. It simply wasn't something I had ever done. It wasn't something I had ever let myself think about doing. There were walls around that thought, tall, well-built walls that I had constructed so carefully over so many years that I had actually forgotten they were walls. I had convinced myself they were just the shape of me. "I don't think so," I said, keeping my voice light, keeping it easy, like it didn't matter. "Why not?" Maya asked. And the infuriating thing about Maya is that she never asks why not like a challenge. She asks it like genuine curiosity, like she actually wants to know, like the answer might be interesting. And I opened my mouth to give her the obvious answer, the one I had ready, the one I always had ready, and nothing came out. Because I didn't actually have a reason. I had a feeling, a fast, fluttery, slightly panicked feeling that lived somewhere between my chest and my stomach and had no name I was willing to give it. But a feeling is not a reason. And Maya, brilliant, relentless Maya, could tell the difference. 5 minutes, she said. Just put it on for 5 minutes. If you hate it, I will never speak of this again. I will take this secret to my grave. I will become a nun of silence. I stared at her. She held the dress out further. And something inside me, something small and quiet and very, very tired of those walls, said yes before my brain could say no. I took the dress. And standing there in Maya's bedroom, in the golden October light, with my heart doing something strange and my hands not entirely steady, I stepped into something I didn't have words for yet. I didn't know it then. I couldn't have known it then. But I was stepping into myself. Pause. Breathe. Because what comes next, what I felt when I looked in that mirror, is something I've spent months trying to find the right words for. And I think I finally have them. The fabric was softer than I expected. That was the first thing. I don't know what I thought it would feel like. Stiff, maybe, or strange, or wrong, but it wasn't any of those things. It settled around me like it was adjusting to me, like it was being polite. The rose gold caught the light from Maya's window and threw tiny warm reflections across the wall, and I stood very still, afraid that if I moved too quickly the moment would dissolve. Maya was behind me, quiet for once in her magnificent loud life, and she zipped the back up slowly, carefully, and then stepped aside. "Look," she said softly. I looked, and the person in the mirror looked back at me, and I didn't know who they were. That sounds frightening. I want to be clear. It wasn't frightening. It was something else entirely. Something I had never felt before and didn't have a category for. The person in the mirror was wearing my face, had my eyes, my hands, my exact particular way of holding their shoulders slightly too high when they're nervous, but they looked different. Lighter, somehow, like something that had been compressed had been given room to expand. I stood there for what felt like a very long time. Maya didn't say anything. She just watched me look at myself, and she had the grace, the extraordinary, loving grace, to let me have that moment without filling it with words. "Finally," I said, and my voice came out quieter than I intended. "Huh." And Maya smiled. Not a triumphant smile. Not an "I told you so" smile. Just a warm, soft, knowing smile that said, "I see you. I've always seen you. I was just waiting for you to see yourself." After that first moment, that quiet, enormous, world-shifting first moment, you might expect that everything simply opened up. That I twirled around in the rose gold dress and laughed and felt free, and that was the end of the complicated part. That would be a much shorter story. Because the truth is, the moment I looked away from the mirror, the walls came back. Fast. Automatic. Like a security system that had detected an intruder and slammed every door shut before I could think. I stepped out of the dress carefully, handed it back to Maya, and said, with a perfectly constructed casual smile, "Okay, your turn. Let's get you beautiful." And Maya let me redirect. Because she's wise. She knows that pushing a door that isn't ready to open yet only makes it harder to open later. She let me zip her into the violet gown and fuss over her hair and pretend that the last 20 minutes hadn't happened. But her eyes, when they caught mine in the mirror as I was fixing her earring, said something she didn't say out loud. We'll come back to this. I drove home that evening thinking about walls. Where do they come from? The walls we build around parts of ourselves. Nobody hands us a blueprint. Nobody sits us down at 5 years old and says, "Here are the things you are allowed to be, and here are the things you are not, and here is where the fence goes." And yet, somehow, we all end up with fences. We all end up knowing, by some mysterious early education, which parts of us are acceptable and which parts should be kept very, very quiet. Mine started, the way most things start, with other people's eyes. I remember being maybe 7 years old and being fascinated by my aunt's jewelry box. It was this beautiful old lacquered thing, painted with flowers, and when you opened it, a little ballerina spun around to a music box tune. Inside were strings of pearls and clip-on earrings shaped like roses and tiny glass brooches that caught the light like magic. I used to sneak into her room when she wasn't looking just to open the box and look at all of it. I didn't want to take anything. I just wanted to look. I just wanted to be near something that beautiful. One afternoon, I was caught. Not by my aunt, she would have been kind. I was caught by an older cousin, who took one look at me crouched over that jewelry box with absolute wonder on my face, and laughed. Not a nice laugh. A sharp, specific laugh that was designed to inform me that I had just revealed something I shouldn't have. That I had shown something that was supposed to be invisible. I closed the box. I stood up. I arranged my face into something neutral. And I started building. Year by year, situation by situation, I got very good at building. I got good at knowing which version of me was safe to show and which version needed to stay behind the wall. I didn't think of it as hiding. Hiding felt like there was something shameful being concealed. I thought of it as just being appropriate, being sensible, being the version of yourself that other people were comfortable with, which felt like consideration for others rather than a limitation on yourself. It took me until that October afternoon in Maya's bedroom to realize that those two things, consideration for others and limitation on yourself, are not always the same thing. And that sometimes what we call being sensible is actually just being afraid. Dressed up in sensible clothes. Given sensible reasons. Made to look so reasonable that we never examine it. The week after Maya's dress incident, I found myself noticing things I hadn't let myself notice before. The way certain colors made me feel something warm and settled. The way particular fabrics moved when people walked in them, and how that movement looked like, I don't know, like freedom made visible. I started noticing the confidence with which some people inhabited themselves, the ease of it, the total unself-consciousness, and I felt something that I finally had to name honestly. Longing. Not jealousy. Not resentment. Pure, clean, quiet longing, the kind that tells you something important about what you actually want versus what you've told yourself to want. I called Maya that Friday night. I didn't plan to. I was sitting on my couch with a cup of tea going cold on the table and my thoughts going loud in my head, and I picked up my phone and called her, and when she answered I said, "I keep thinking about the dress." There was a pause. Then Maya said, with the gentleness of someone who has been waiting patiently for a very specific phone call, "I know. Come over tomorrow. I have things to show you." And just like that, the door that had slammed shut opened a crack again. Just a crack. Just enough to let some light through. But that's all you ever need, isn't it? Just a crack. Just a little light. Just one person who looks at the parts of you that you've been keeping in the dark and says, "I see that. It's beautiful. Let's give it some room." I went to Maya's the next day. I went with my heart doing that strange fluttery thing again, and my carefully constructed casual smile firmly in place, ready to deflect if I needed to, ready to make it light and easy and not a big deal. But Maya had other plans. Maya, as I may have mentioned, always has other plans. Maya's apartment on that Saturday morning smelled like jasmine tea and hairspray and something warm baking in the oven. She met me at the door in a silk robe, her hair wrapped up in a towel turban, holding out a mug before I'd even said hello. This is one of the great gifts of a true best friend. They don't make you explain yourself before they've fed you. We sat in her living room for a while, just talking about other things. Her week. My week. A movie we'd both seen. The terrible new coffee shop that had opened near my office. And I felt the walls doing their thing, keeping the real conversation at arm's length, keeping everything safe and manageable and normal. But Maya had arranged the room differently than usual. Her bedroom door was open, and through it, I could see that she had laid things out. Carefully, thoughtfully. Not in an overwhelming way, not a whole costume, not a complete transformation, just a few items. A soft cashmere sweater in a deep forest green. A pair of wide-legged trousers in charcoal. A silk scarf in the most extraordinary shade of burnt amber. Little things. Quiet things. Things that said exploration rather than performance. I noticed. Of course I noticed. Maya waited until I'd finished my tea before she nodded toward the room and said, simply, "No pressure. But if you want to look, you can look." And this time, I didn't laugh it off. I didn't redirect. I set my mug down on her coffee table very deliberately, and I said, "Tell me why you think I should." She thought about it for a moment. Really thought about it. Maya never gives you a quick answer when the question deserves a real one. Then she said, "Because you looked at yourself in that mirror last week for 2 minutes, and something in your face relaxed that I have never seen relax in the 10 years I've known you. And I think you deserve more of that. I think you deserve to feel relaxed in your own face." I sat with that for a while. Relaxed in your own face. What a thing to say. What a precise, devastating, perfect thing to say. Because she was right. She was absolutely right. And I knew at the moment she said it, the way you know things that have been true for a long time, but have been living in a room in your mind with the lights off. You don't discover them so much as turn the light switch on and recognize them. I had spent so much of my life performing a version of myself that felt appropriate, that fit within the lines of what I understood to be expected of me, that I had stopped noticing how much energy that performance required. I was so used to the subtle constant effort of being the approved version of myself that I had mistaken the effort for normalcy. I thought everyone felt this mild, persistent tightness, this low-level vigilance about presenting correctly. I thought that was just what being a person felt like. But 2 minutes in that dress had shown me something different was possible. 2 minutes had shown me what it felt like to not be performing. I stood up. I walked to the bedroom door. I stood in the doorway looking at the things Maya had laid out, and I let myself look at them honestly, not with the armor of detachment I usually wore when looking at things I wanted but wouldn't let myself want, but really, actually, openly honestly. The cashmere sweater. The charcoal trousers. The burnt amber scarf. Can I I asked, and my voice was steady, which surprised me. Please, said Maya. I don't know how long I was in that room. Long enough. I tried on the sweater first because it seemed least significant, least symbolic, just a sweater, just a color, nothing dramatic, and pulled it on over my t-shirt and immediately felt something that I can only describe as rightness. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly and completely right, the way a key feels in the correct lock. The trousers next. Then the scarf, which Maya came in to help me with, showing me 2 different ways to tie it, her hands quick and sure, her face neutral, and kind in the way that meant she was deliberately not making a big deal of this, so I wouldn't feel observed. And then she stepped back. And I looked in the mirror, a smaller mirror this time, just the one on the back of her bedroom door, and I had that feeling again. That recognition. That exhale. That oh, there you are. You know what I think, Maya said. I think you've been dressing for someone else your whole life. And you're really good at it. But I think you'd be even better at dressing for yourself. And something in me broke open, quietly, like a window being unlatched and swung wide on a spring morning. Not a shattering, not a breaking down, but a breaking open, and I understood, standing there in borrowed cashmere in my best friend's bedroom, that I had spent my whole life being fluent in a language that wasn't quite my own. And that it was time to learn mine. The thing about self-discovery, real self-discovery, not the Instagram caption kind but the kind that happens in quiet moments in ordinary rooms, is that it's not a single revelation. It's not one big dramatic moment of I have found myself. Here I am. Transformation complete. It's a series of small moments, each one a little braver than the last, each one teaching you something that the previous one made possible. After that Saturday at Maya's, things shifted. Not dramatically. Not in any way that anyone looking at me from the outside would have necessarily noticed. But internally, in the private geography of my own thoughts, the landscape had changed. There were fewer walls. Or maybe the same number of walls, but I could now see them clearly enough to start asking why they were there. I started quietly and privately exploring. Not in grand gestures. In small ones. A particular scarf I let myself wear without overthinking. A color I chose because it made me feel something good rather than because it was neutral enough to go unremarked. Little decisions that seemed minor and were actually enormous because each one was a practice in choosing myself. In letting what I actually wanted have a vote. And I noticed something extraordinary happening. I started feeling more like myself. Not a different self. Not a transformed, unrecognizable self. Just more. More present. More settled. More at ease in my own skin. Like I'd been living in a house with all the curtains drawn for years, and now I was opening them one by one, and the light coming in was so ordinary and so simple and so completely wonderful. Maya and I started meeting on Saturday mornings regularly. She called it our research sessions with enormous amounts of dramatic quotation finger gestures, and I pretended to find this embarrassing, which we both knew was not entirely true. She would bring things she'd found, a vintage blazer with extraordinary buttons, a pair of wide-brimmed hats that she called architecture for your head, earrings that were small sculptures, and we would talk about what I liked and why, and I started developing a vocabulary for something I had never had language for before. I learned that what I was drawn to was not frivolity, not performance, not anything that required justification. What I was drawn to was detail, care, the evidence that something had been made with attention and love. Beautiful things. That is what I had always loved, and the arbitrary rule that certain categories of beautiful things were not available to me was exactly that, arbitrary. One morning, it was a Thursday, I remember because I had an important meeting and had dressed carefully in my usual professional armor. Maya called me on my way to work and asked how I was feeling. Like I'm wearing a costume, I said, before I could stop myself. There was a pause. Which one, she said, and I laughed. Because she meant it seriously. Because she understood that there are many kinds of costumes, and some of them we wear on stage, and some of them we wear to our own lives. The wrong one, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, you know what you're building right now? You're building the courage to wear the right one. I thought about that all day. Courage. I hadn't thought of it in those terms before. I'd thought of it as exploration, as curiosity, as a private project that had no name yet. But Maya was right, as Maya often is. What I was doing required courage. Because wearing the wrong costume for long enough makes you forget what the right one feels like. Makes you mistake the wrongness for just the nature of clothes. And choosing differently, even in small ways, even privately, that takes something. That takes you deciding that your own comfort matters. That takes you deciding that how you feel in your own skin is worth paying attention to. That takes you looking in the mirror and deciding that the person looking back at you deserves to be seen, really seen, fully seen, and not managed. The mirror, I was learning, doesn't lie. It doesn't tell you what you want to hear or what you're afraid to hear. It just shows you what's there. And if you're brave enough to keep looking, past the first defensive glance, past the critical inventory, past all the voices telling you what's wrong or inappropriate or too much, if you keep looking, you start to see something true. You start to see yourself. And once you see yourself, really, honestly see yourself, it becomes very hard to look away. And even harder to go back to not looking. Because, you know, now, what it feels like to be seen. Even just by yourself. Even just in one unguarded moment. You know. And knowing changes everything. 3 months after that first October afternoon in Maya's bedroom, I did something that seemed small from the outside and felt enormous from the inside. I walked out of a room wearing exactly what I wanted to wear. Not at a costume party. Not at a private event with controlled circumstances. On an ordinary Wednesday, in an ordinary situation, I made a choice about how I wanted to look, and I didn't change it before walking out the door. I didn't compromise it into something more palatable, more explainable, more defensible if questioned. I wore something that felt like me, really, fully, genuinely me, and I walked out into the world with it on. I'm not going to tell you, I wasn't nervous. I was. My heart was doing that flutter thing at a fairly impressive volume, and my hands were not entirely steady, and part of my brain was running a very committed background process of, are you sure? Are you absolutely sure? You could still change, there's still time, but I'd made a decision, and the decision was, yes, I'm sure. The right version of me is worth more than the comfortable version of a stranger. Something about that decision, that one specific decision on that one ordinary Wednesday, opened a door in me that I didn't know had been closed. Or rather, I knew it had been closed. I just hadn't known, until I opened it, how much light was on the other side. I want to tell you what happened when I walked into the coffee shop on the corner, my coffee shop, the one I go to every morning where the barista knows my order. She looked at me. She smiled. She said, "You look amazing today." Just that. Just those 4 words. But they landed with the weight of something much larger, because she wasn't seeing a costume. She was seeing me, the real arrangement of me, the one I'd chosen instead of the one I'd defaulted to. And being seen, genuinely seen, in the thing you've actually chosen for yourself, that is one of the most quietly extraordinary feelings in the world. I thought about the 7-year-old standing at the jewelry box. I thought about him, about me, crouching over those glass brooches and pearl strings with pure, uncomplicated wonder, and then closing the box and standing up and arranging my face into something blank because a single sharp laugh from a cousin had told me that wonder was not allowed here. I thought, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry it took this long. I'm sorry I let someone else's discomfort become your limitation. And then I thought, we're here now. That's what matters. We're here now, and we're not closing the box anymore. There's a quote I read somewhere, I've carried it around ever since, that says, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." I used to read that and find it slightly sentimental. A bit neat. Life is not usually that tidy, that linear, that purposeful. But now I read it and I think, yes, that's exactly it. That is exactly the shape of what this has been. A slow, non-linear, sometimes frightening, sometimes exhilarating, ultimately irreplaceable process of becoming who I actually am instead of who I understood I was supposed to be. And the becoming isn't finished. That's the other thing I've learned. It doesn't arrive at a destination and stop. You don't cross a finish line and get a certificate that says fully become. Congratulations. It's ongoing. It's daily. Every morning is another small question. What do I actually want today? What does the real version of me need today? What is the brave choice today? Some days the brave choice is enormous. Some days it's a scarf. Both count. Both matter. Both are you choosing yourself over the comfortable performance of someone you've outgrown. Maya met me for lunch that Wednesday. She took one look at me when I walked in, and she didn't say I told you so. She said, "There you are."
Not look at you.
Not that's so great. Just, there you are. As if she'd simply been waiting for me to show up, and now I had, and everything was as it should be. I sat down across from her, and I thought, this is what it means to be known. This is what it means to have someone love you enough to hold space for the version of you that you haven't become yet, to keep a light on in the window while you find your way there, to say there you are instead of finally, because there's no judgment in it. Only welcome. How do you feel? She asked. And I thought about it, really thought about it, and then I said, like myself. Like myself. 2 words. No explanation needed. I want to talk to you about something important. Something I've been sitting with for a while now, turning over in my hands, trying to find the cleanest and most honest way to say. This is not a story about clothes. I know it started with a dress. I know there's a before and after that's partly visible on the surface, in the choices I make now about how I present myself to the world. But the clothes were never the point. They were the door, the specific door in this specific life. But what was on the other side of the door had nothing to do with fabric or color or the way something moves when you walk. What was on the other side of the door was me. The full version. The honest version. The version that wasn't managing itself or monitoring itself or holding itself carefully within boundaries set by other people's comfort. The version that had been waiting, with extraordinary patience, for me to stop maintaining the walls and just come inside. I think about all the years before that October afternoon, and I feel not regret exactly. Regret is too simple, too neat. I feel something more like tenderness toward my younger self. Tenderness for the extraordinary effort it takes to live inside a self you've partially edited, to maintain the performance of appropriateness with such thoroughness that you forget it's a performance. That takes so much energy. I was exhausted by it. I realize now in a low-level constant way that I had simply accepted as the default setting of being alive. I'm not exhausted like that anymore. That's the difference. That's the real before and after. Not the outer changes, though those are real too and I love them and I no longer apologize for loving them, but the internal shift. The energy that was going into maintenance is now going into living. Into actual, present, engaged, interested living. Into being curious about the world instead of vigilant about how I'm being perceived in it. Into saying yes to things instead of running everything through the filter of, is this acceptable? Is this appropriate? Will this require explaining? The things I love openly now. The things I want without apology. The things that make me feel beautiful, and I use that word deliberately without embarrassment. I pursue without needing to justify them to anyone, including myself. Beautiful. That's a word I didn't use to let myself use. Beautiful was for other people, for other kinds of things. I had a whole internal hierarchy of which kinds of people got to use that word about themselves, and I was not on the approved list. But here's what I've learned. Beauty is not a category you get assigned to or excluded from. It's a way of being present to yourself and the world. It's attentiveness. It's care. It's choosing things with love and wearing them with conviction and moving through the world like you believe you're allowed to be here, fully, unambiguously, magnificently allowed. I am allowed to be here. You are allowed to be here. Fully. All of you. Not the edited version, not the version that fits neatly into other people's expectations, not the version that costs you the least in terms of external scrutiny. The whole actual glorious, complicated, luminous version of you. I think about Maya, my brilliant, dramatic, absolutely essential Maya, and I think about the specific gift she gave me. Not the dress, not the clothes, not even the mirror. What she gave me was permission. Not permission she had the power to give. Technically, nobody can give you that permission except yourself. But she reflected it back at me. She held up a mirror and said, "Look, here is someone who sees you and is not afraid of what they see. Here is someone who thinks the full version of you is worth looking at. Here is evidence that your unedited self is not dangerous or wrong or too much." Sometimes that's all it takes. Just one person. Just one moment of being seen. Just one there you are from someone who has been watching for you, who knows the difference between the performance and the person. If you're watching this and you recognize something in the story, some version of that wall, that careful editing, that low-level exhaustion of maintaining the approved version of yourself, I want to say something to you directly. The version of you that you've been keeping behind the wall is not wrong. It's not inappropriate. It's not too much. It's not the thing that needs to be fixed or managed or hidden. It is, in fact, and I say this with the certainty of someone who has stood in the center of this particular revelation, the best part. The most interesting part. The part that has been patient and quiet and faithful all this time, waiting for you to decide it deserved the light. Give it the light. Not all at once, if that's too much. In small ways, in private moments, in borrowed cashmere in your best friend's bedroom, if that's where it starts. Start wherever you are. Start with a scarf. Start with a color. Start with just wanting something without immediately talking yourself out of it. Start with letting yourself look in the mirror for 2 minutes more than usual, past the critical inventory, into the actual face of the person looking back at you. That person is extraordinary. That person has been here all along. That person, you, the whole unedited, luminous, complicated, glorious you, deserves to be seen. To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. That's not my line. That belongs to Ralph Waldo Emerson, who apparently knew something about walls and what's on the other side of them. But I'll add to it. I'll say, to be yourself, fully and without apology, after years of careful editing. That's not just an accomplishment. That's an act of love. Love for the 7-year-old at the jewelry box. Love for every version of yourself that maintained the performance so carefully and so long. Love for the person you are right now, who deserves to wear the right costume, the one that fits, the one that makes your face relax into something that looks like home. I am that person. I am still becoming her. Every day, a little more, a little louder, a little more convinced that the light in here is worth sharing. Maya texted me this morning. It said, Saturday? I found something in the most extraordinary shade of emerald, and I immediately thought of you. I texted back, I'll bring the tea. And I smiled. I smiled with my whole face, without managing it, without checking it, without wondering if it was the right kind of smile for the situation. Just a smile. Just mine. Just me, walking toward Saturday, toward emerald green, toward the next small brave choice that says, I am here. I am whole. I am, finally and wonderfully and completely, myself. And that is more than enough. It is everything.